Good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure to see you here again. I'm very excited to share with you that I'm the plenary speaker of the ELT conference that's going to be held in Limassol of Cyprus. It's my third time in Cyprus, and this is going to be a rehearsal a week in advance before my trip. So without further ado, I'm going to start off with this presentation, which I will be sharing after the day of the event. And speaking of the event itself, let's share the PowerPoint presentation so that you can see what I will be talking about. And away we go. Transversal competency in the ELT environment. I will be there as a plenary speaker. I'm proud to say that this event is sponsored and organized by the Ministry of Education of Cyprus. It's a huge honor to be there. And without further ado, I think I should start with this presentation. Now, when we're talking about transversal competency in the ELT environment, I will begin with a question to trigger your curiosity. Now, I often have a lesson with my students and I ask them these trick questions, critical thinking, if you wish. When was the first light bulb invented and by whom? Okay, so they'll start, searching for information in the passage itself or on their phones, the internet. And they will rightfully find that it was invented by Thomas Edison in 1879, although this is quite debatable. Now, I then ask them the second question. Why was the invention of the light bulb the greatest invention in history? And then you see the kids scratching their heads. It's very difficult to actually acknowledge the importance of something. Many a time, we have been trained in focusing our perception of things in such a way that we only learn things by heart, like data, facts, historical accomplishments, without understanding the meaning. I asked my students to start searching the net, and they did so. They couldn't find, the information that they were looking for. It took them more than 20 minutes to figure out the importance of the light bulb. Yes, this is a true story. So, after helping them a bit, we found some information such as helping them establish social order after sundown, extending the workday well into the night, and of course, allowing us to navigate and travel safely in the dark. Now, did my students do something wrong? Not really. However, I would say that we as educators are the ones that are at fault, because have we trained their young minds that are thirsty for knowledge in the way of handling everyday concerns, developing critical thought? Today's students find it difficult to produce ideas. I mean, a lot of them excel at the language, but they lack, adhere to, or suffer from the following. I've seen a lot of my students who are afraid of being judged by their peers. They are used to rote learning, which is something that they should reject. The inability or fear to doubt a source, whatever they find online, they're like, okay, this must be true. I found it on the internet. And of course, this is our fault as well as teachers, too much emphasis, which is being placed on grammar and vocabulary. Now, the whole thing is that critical thinking is not fostered in schools. I'm going to share some statistics with you. Did you know that by 2030, an estimated 825 million children are expected to leave school without basic secondary level skills? Now, as you can see, I have a lot of information on this slide. I'm not going to read everything to you. However, you can acknowledge how bad the situation is. Despite the fact that students are finishing, university, they're holding a college or university, degree. The thing is that they are not capable of entering the job market because they have not been trained to do so. And this is something that we as teachers are obliged to rectify and assist them in their next steps in their careers. So we have to equip them with the right competencies, the skills, the knowledge, the values, and the attitudes in order to make that step, that extra effort to survive and also contribute to today's society. These are the transversal competencies. Now, we are talking about interpersonal skills, the way we communicate and collaborate with others, intrapersonal skills, which means acknowledging our strengths, our weaknesses, media and information literacy. And this has to do with searching for the correct information in sites that we do trust and the proper way to use this information. We have well-being and faith, belief in something, being healthy, and of course, we're talking about physical as well as mental health. Global citizenship, we are talking about globalization. We are all members of a universal society. There should be respect towards one another, and of course, understanding, and of course, critical and innovative thinking. Now, throughout this presentation, I'm going to share techniques with you that have to do with integrating all these transversal competencies into the lesson. We'll be focusing on simple exercises for junior level kids as well as C2 level proficiency students. Now, let's look at another example that I used with some of my students. This is an essay topic. Is plastic surgery a necessity? Now, at this point, most of my students, if not all of them, expressed themselves against plastic surgery. And it took them a few minutes to think of some ideas. You can see them in the presentation. And the thing is that I was baffled because things that are taught from one generation to the other are sometimes blindly accepted. Now, after, some teasing and, working around the question, I'm like, guys, can't you think of any benefits to plastic surgery? Isn't it something that we can actually endorse? Please justify why you are not in favor of it. And, they had second thoughts. One of my students was bold enough to raise her hand and she said that when I grow up, I want to have plastic surgery on my nose. And it took a lot of courage and strength to share this with the rest of the class. You know what? We are afraid of being judged by our peers. We are afraid of being reprimanded. We are also afraid that our opinion might not be the best, or we would be judged based on our opinion. So as you can see, we did some brainstorming in favor: social acceptance, mental health, burn victims, and health issues. Now, let's look into the critical thinking model. You've probably seen Bloom's taxonomy before. For those of you who are not aware what this is, it's a classification system used to define and distinguish different levels of human cognition: thinking, learning, understanding. Now, how it works, we start from the bottom and, these skills progress towards the top of the pyramid. I myself am a supporter of critical thinking. I was struggling as a student because I was not able to rote learn whatever I was given. Learning things by heart was very difficult for me, and that diminished my self-esteem. I thought that I was not a capable student. Now, the thing is that Bloom's taxonomy is a remarkable basis on which you can, prepare your lessons. However, it has come under scrutiny. And yes, I'm actually going there. Because if we look at the bottom of the pyramid, it says remember. And to be honest, I had a huge issue with this, as do many of our students. On the other hand, I was always creative. My teachers told me that one day you're going to be an author, and I actually accomplished that goal because I was creative. So instead of progressing gradually towards the top of the pyramid, let's try focusing on all these skills in a way that they are connected, and let's relabel them: knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. Yes, we will be working on the first transversal competency skill, critical thinking. And we are going to look into the whole idea behind critical thinking. Now, many of you might be wondering, can we actually teach critical thinking, or is it an innate ability? Well, not only can it be taught, it can be practiced and refined. As with all skills, critical thinking must be fostered and enhanced, and subsequently, a student will adopt it as a learning approach in class. It can be used in grammar, vocabulary, in receptive skills like reading and listening, and of course, productive ones like speaking and writing. I took the liberty of using this FCE Cambridge sample paper, and we are going to analyze the first paragraph only of a reading comprehension. Now, this text is labeled The Young Inventor, and we're going to use the critical thinking model, the one that we lightly borrowed from Bloom's taxonomy and restructured it in our own way. Knowledge. Students should be aware of what they are looking for. As we can see in the first line, Tim Freeman had an idea. Okay, that's knowledge of what this text is. Comprehension. What do we want to look into? What does he want to do? He wants to improve the efficiency of school buses. Great. Application. How are we going to use this? It's not only to save money, but also help the environment. And of course, as we move forward, analysis. It has to do with a revolutionary idea. Synthesis. 5 years later, it finally saw his dream come true. And of course, the evaluation. It's energy efficient. Now, I know what you're going to say. Are our students capable of doing this? No, unless they've been trained to do this from a younger age. And you don't have to label each part of the critical thinking model. It will come naturally, and they will work on the text without even realizing that they are labeled as thus. So, where can I find the proper ELT material to stimulate critical thinking in class? ELT course books that have embedded the critical thinking element, valid online resources. Just be careful of scammers. Usually the ones that are free are actually, properly presented and prepared. And of course, we're teachers. We can create our own material. But just wait a second. When is the best time to start using the critical thinking model? Is it difficult for junior classes? Well, in my opinion, they should foster these skills from the get-go. And junior classes are ideal for this. There must be a constant increase in the difficulty as the students adapt. And the concept is to keep them on their toes and provide new challenges. For example, this is an exercise that is over a century old. Write the missing letters. Were you aware of the fact that this is a critical thinking exercise? It says write the missing letters. It does not explain anywhere. Write the capital letters if it's a capital letter missing. Write the small letter if it's missing. The student examines the sheet and reaches the conclusion that, okay, here's a missing spot for the small, that's a missing spot for the capital. So let's move on to another exercise. Let's take it a notch higher. Fill in the missing letters, listen and check. So we're focusing on 2 receptive skills, listening and reading. You also have the text underneath. Utilization of visual stimulation. Okay, so we're looking at the word that is missing, Matthews, all right? We're igniting critical thought. At some point, the teacher hasn't explained yet the double T. And as you can see, there are specific gaps that are missing. And the student will actually implement through the productive skill and writing. So the student has learned something new, that double T are 2 T's, and when you hear it, it means they have to write it 2 times. And this without even explaining anything. Write the missing numbers, just like the alphabet earlier. You have a missing digit, a missing word, but they are all numbers. Let's take it on a bit higher, okay? So match the words to the numbers. It's so boring when you have kids and they're like, okay, I'm learning how to count. Once they reach 20, they're like, okay, what do I do now? 21, 22, 23, 24. Oh, this is easy. 25, 26. Oh, I just have to repeat myself. Let's mix things up a bit. As you can see in this exercise, we have a 20, okay, 29 in this case, 80, 22, 100, 25. So you're offering them a challenge in such a way that you can mix the order and make it a bit more difficult for them. Now, how about games? Say a number from 20 to 100, and your partner says the number before and after it. You know how difficult that is for kids? So have them scratch their heads because it's also entertaining and it's thought-provoking. What we want is to sharpen their responsive skills so that they can do this, impulsively. Now, another thing that is kind of discouraging, we have so many students attending exams based on the CFR to obtain their precious certificate in English language learning. One of the main reasons they fail, not only in reading but in writing, is because they never pay attention to the instructions. Have them underline the words. And by doing so, they will get used to responding appropriately to the exercises. This should be done at a young level. Now, we have a recipe here. Ingredients, 400 g pasta, what is this? But they will hear the teacher say grams. And further down, we have 1 TBSP olive oil. The teacher will say tablespoon. Afterwards, we will stimulate their minds in such a fashion that they'll start learning abbreviations. They will have comprehended that, okay, it's an ingredient, we're talking about a recipe, so we're talking about quantity, and they start matching based on what they had heard and their critical thought. Now, the same thing applies with simple exercises. Students start adapting. They start figuring out all these little clues concerning critical thought, underlining the proper explanation from the task. We're focusing on task prerequisites. And if they find it difficult, offer them alternatives. Each individual's mind works in a different way. In this case, we have a spidergram. Did you know that many students actually find this way more productive for them to develop their critical thinking? It helps them. So we offer them receptive alternatives, and as we all process information in various ways. And I would advise you to use visual, audio, kinetic, or a combination of all to get the desired result. Because it is unfair to say that, oh, my student didn't understand the exercise. Offer the student alternatives. Our minds perceive information in different fashions. So the students acknowledge and set clear goals. Now, as for critical thinking activities, you have a proficiency class and they have had little to no stimulation in critical thought. I remember we had 4 new students. They were university students. They came to the school, they registered, and they wanted to work on proficiency. But they had never, ever worked on critical thinking development. So what do we do in these cases? Let's try some approaches. One of the topics I use, don't get me wrong, I'm not in favor of alcohol, but I actually asked them, does alcohol always create problems? So, because our minds are wired this way, it's being passed down from one generation to the other. Alcohol is something really bad. Don't get me wrong, it is bad. But I wanted them to explain why, and I also wanted them to explain why it also could be beneficial. I want them to think about both sides of the coin. So, you start off with some critical thinking questions. What role can the government play? Should we completely abolish alcohol? And that's where you start a whole conversation. And be very careful not to use open-ended questions. There is no right answer. How do you feel about this issue? What is the greatest challenge an alcoholic faces? And so on. Try not to allow them to answer with a yes, no reply. I have been an oral examiner since 2003. It's almost 20 years now. And a lot of students literally enter the exam room and they simply answer yes or no. And I'm also talking about proficiency level students. Now, how about another activity, which isn't exactly an activity, it's actually a strategy. Allow them time to think. Okay, discourage them from answering on the spot. Fluency and impulsive answers are not always thought out extensively. This will come later on in their career as students. They will start focusing more on the meaning and the importance of an answer instead of fluency, but both combined will come out eventually later on. And of course, why not make it a bit more difficult for them? Ask for elaboration. They might give you a short sentence, a short reply. Ask them, for more information. It's not a bad thing. Now, you want to help them? That's great. I'm in favor of it as well. You could provide scaffolds, hints, clues, examples. You can split your students into teams, assign tasks, make comparisons, and of course, encourage debates. And this is the part, as we're slowly leaving critical thinking and we're going to work on interpersonal skills. Now, encouraging debates fosters the capacity to make an argument and support one's opinion. Okay, it's highly beneficial for writing tasks. And the last one I'd like to propose for critical thinking before we start with interpersonal skills is to predict content based on the title of a passage, pausing an audio or video segment. And of course, there is a reason that we accompany reading texts with images. The image sequence actually help stimulate many students' minds in such a way that they will comprehend the text way better. Now, controversial statements, thinking about both sides of an argument is something that will help them. Even if they're in favor of one side of the coin, after finishing the debate, have them switch and, support the other. And helping them, learn how to do a refutation is very beneficial, especially when writing an essay. Now, interpersonal skills. Fostering them. Pair or group discussions. Now, the first thing that I'd like to talk about is listening triangles. A speaker, a questionnaire, and a note taker. Now, let's assume that you have your course books and the ELT focus material has to do with daily routines. This is from #English. We have the stimulation. We want to stimulate their minds and start assessing what they have before them. Okay, daily routines, hobbies. So they are stimulated and we ignite their critical thinking. And we ask them, how busy is your everyday life? Okay, that's great. They start, using the target vocabulary. They start producing their ideas. And of course, they're using the grammar elements. Now, what about consolidation? Here's where things are getting really interesting. Now, we talked about listening triangles. Let's actually see how this works. In speaking, for example, you can ask your student, what is your daily routine? But let's take it a notch higher. Let's see what we do when we try to ignite critical thinking through interpersonal skills. Ask your partner about his daily routine. Present your findings to the class. Wow. It's easy to explain to others what you do, but when someone else describes his hobbies, his routines, and you have to deliver what he just said to the class in your own words, that's where things get interesting. And of course, you also have a note taker who will take down notes in such a way that might differ from all three of the members of the party. Now, what's important in pair group discussions, question words, what, why, how, have your students debate, have your students discuss in class, use question words. What is your favorite hobby? When did you first try it? So one student is asking the other, why do you like it? And we want to trigger their minds, and that is why it's so important to collaborate. Now, have you ever heard of the fishbowl debate? So this is a variation of the group discussion, student-driven discussion with two groups, and the first group is in the middle, like a fishbowl, and they discuss about a topic. You choose the topic. Now, the second group, the rest of the class, is, observing and taking notes and assessing. After the end of the discussion, the group offers feedback. The strengths, the weaknesses, proposals, the opinion, and of course, they then switch. And the second group becomes the first group, and they have their fishbowl debate. Now, conversations and debates are probably one of the best tools in ELT to practice the grammar, vocabulary, communication, and of course, critical thinking in combination with interpersonal skills. Now, There are so many games that you can play in class. I used this with my lower class the other day, about a week ago. Have you ever heard of snowballing? So this is one variation. If you don't want to throw pieces of paper, in the class, you can actually just pass one piece of paper to the next student or the one that is sitting next to him. So you have each student write a sentence on a piece of paper. They start out writing an essay. Then they have to crumple it and toss it in the middle. A student will grab it and they'll continue the story. In my case, in my class, I actually, had one student pass the paper to the next one. But the whole idea is to have them exchange opinions to see how other students write, to be inspired by their writing and see another perspective. Let's go back to the junior classes. Task sharing, sorting, matching, and ranking. So we have our junior classes, and we're trying to encourage them to use the target vocabulary. Now, you can make suggestions by using the language, justifying your opinion, agreeing, or presenting another viewpoint. For example, ask them, see the items in the picture. Now, instead of telling your students, what do you see in this picture? I see a brush, I see lipstick, I see gloves. No, let's make it more difficult. Let them think about it and let them communicate and collaborate. What are the value of the items? Which is the most expensive item? And then the students have this debate. So I had this junior class and they were so funny. One of my students was like, the brush is expensive. You use it to brush your hair. And one of the girls in the class said, no, it's the lipstick. And the boy asked, why? And she's like, do you know how much money my mom pays for lipstick? So you can understand that, this exchange of information assists and changes our perception of what value has, what each item has as its value. Now, the thing is that you get to learn, you have an entertaining time, you debate, and of course, the most important of all, you learn how to use the language. Okay, now, another exercise, again for junior levels, point to the toys with wheels. Because describing an object, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's even more difficult to have them think about it in a critical fashion. Point to the toys made of plastic. Some toys are made out of two, kind of materials. And then you have them, cross-check their findings. Maybe they can do this as a written exercise and they're like sharing, okay, I found this. What about you? This comparison, collaboration, and communication is vital. Now, how about multi-skilled exercises? I love, Simon Says or these songs. Listening, speaking, adaptation to body language. Let's say you have an exercise, sing the song and mime the action. We are all aware of the song, If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it and you really want to show it, if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Now, here's where things get interesting. Let's go to the second verse. If you're happy and you know it, stomp your feet. Doof, doof. So, what did we just say? Stomp your feet. Do they know what stomp means? Are you aware of any junior course book that actually includes, the word stomp? No. But the magic, the wonder of having a song, a game in class, the students will start looking at your actions. Okay, the teacher is, stomping the feet, and they understand what the word means, even though they've never seen it in written form. And of course, they're actually copying the actions of their classmates. That's why it's so important to mimic and follow, the teacher's lead. And they get to learn so many things just by moving around in class. And they learn something in English, which was not even taught in their book. Okay, so this, of course, needs coordination and a lot of teamwork. Now, what about verbal collaborative games that you can use, with your higher level classes? Storytelling. Tell a story, each sentence of which starts with the next letter of the alphabet, starting with A. Anyone seen my keys? Beside the phone. Can't find them. Don't you remember where you put them? Okay, you have to allow some leeway if, the first word has to do with personal, a subject, object, or anything. Okay, now You can utilize variations such as names or items. You can tell your students, okay, I want each of you to introduce yourselves in alphabetical order. And like, oh my God, who's first? Who's second? And it's amazing how they start coordinating. And this communication. No, you're going to go first. Okay, we're ready, teacher. It's so incredible. Now, let's look at another game. Choose a category and come up with 10 examples within 10 seconds. Let's talk about makeup again. Lipstick, blush, eyeliner. And it's great. And it's sometimes difficult for some individuals. I mean, there are both boys and girls that, don't use makeup. And, they're like, oh, okay, I learned something new today. Or, maybe something about mechanics that not all kids are into. These games are so helpful because not only about learning English, but generally things in life. Fact or fiction, each student states two truths and one fictional claim about himself. The others must guess what is true. Now, we have the who am I? The student offers clues as to the person he or she is impersonating. Okay, we can do a little role play here. You can say, for example, like, I'm a mighty pirate, and act like Jack Sparrow. Now, speaking of which, interpersonal skills are used effectively in drama and theater. You use them to rehearse a language, practice intonation, pronunciation, and of course, you use it in speech or writing. I'm highly in favor of drama and theater. Now, where can I find ELT material for theatrical productions, you might ask? Well, first of all, ELT course books contain a plethora of ideas and materials for your own play. There are so many books such as Hashtag English that, endorse public speaking, which has become a part of our lives. Public speaking is essential when presenting something at work or for a job interview. And of course, there are readers that are so easy to adapt. And thank goodness, our publisher has a lot of readers. Now, drama can be taken and theater to another level. So, nursery rhymes, you can read books, watch videos. And you know what? This is something that I do with my kids very often. I gather them around me, and we sit down on this wonderful rug and I start, reading a story and, we're role playing. And I like doing the big bad wolf and I have some of my students doing the three little pigs. So I'm like, I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in. And then my kids answer, not by the hair of your chinny chin chin. You can't fool us with that old sheepskin. This is so funny because they have no idea what they just said. They actually don't. They don't know all the words, but it's so funny. Okay, it's a catchy tune. They learn it by heart. They're smiling. They're having a good time. So it's entertaining. You help them, participate through role playing, and they learn pronunciation, even if they don't know what the words mean. But eventually they will see them in the future at some point. And that's the beauty of having theatrical and drama performances. Now, pronunciation and intonation are crucial elements of public speaking, as we all know. There's a reason why we have pronunciation exercises in the books. How many of our students are like, I'm ashamed of my accent, my pronunciation, and their self-esteem starts reducing. That's why there are pronunciation exercises in books. Always do them in class. They're very important. And of course, drama and theater, we should point this out, are collaborations which promote these skills. Now, I'm going to work on an exercise as we slowly move towards the next transversal competency skill. So, intonation through role play. You can say, did you clean your room? Or you can say, did you clean your room? Now, you can use the same sentence with various emotions. It's very important to stress the fact that intonation can completely change the meaning of a sentence. Now, you're going to be wondering, what does this have to do with transversal competencies? Just bear with me, you'll be pleasantly surprised. We're going to use an example. Now, first of all, always have students read aloud various lines in different ways. Let them experiment, act it out. We want word stress, sentence stress, intonation. They're excited and amazed at the result. We're going to use an example that you might have seen before in the past. So the way we stress a sentence can actually change its meaning. We have the sentence, I didn't say he stole the money. How many different ways can we actually pronounce this sentence? Since this is a rehearsal, I can imagine that the audience would, reply, but I'm going to answer right away, 7. Yes, there's 7 different ways, as many as the number of words in the sentence. I didn't say he stole the money, someone else did. I didn't say he stole the money, I said something else. I didn't say he stole the money, I might have implied it or wrote it down. I didn't say he stole the money, maybe someone else did. I didn't say he stole the money, maybe he misplaced it. I didn't say he stole the money, maybe it's some other kind of stash we have. I didn't say he stole the money. He probably stole something else, maybe a watch. Okay, so it's very important to know how to stress and pronounce in a sentence. This is actually easy when speaking, but what about writing? And this is the next part of this presentation. So we're going to talk about media literacy, social awareness, and how to use the internet in such a fashion that we get the desired results. Now, we have to be very careful of where and how we communicate. We have this silly little, graph here. Good night. And, the other one replies, no smiley face. Is he mad at me? So one of the individuals here can't hear the other person because it's written. How many times have we had these insecurities? I mean, when we receive a text message, is he mad? Is he sad? Is he happy? Is he, furious? We don't know actually. So it's essential to choose the right platforms for communication with font format variations, for example, italics. Now, for example, remember the exercise earlier that we did? I didn't say he stole the money. If only we could use italics in Messenger or Instagram or anywhere for that matter. That is why I always tell my students when you are planning on communicating with one another and it has to do with school, with work, or with me, please send an email. Okay, because in emails, you can use font format variations, you can use italics, okay, quotation marks to stress something. And you should be very careful of how you address the other person. Look at the examples below. Hey, can you get back to me on the approval for the campaign? Is it a hey, like please, or is it hey with an authorial voice? So you can understand that we have to be very careful of what we write. The fact that we have it in our minds at that moment doesn't mean that that's going to come out, efficiently and the way that we want. You should always check the credibility of sources. Please stress this to your students. I mean, I have my kids say, well, I found it on Wikipedia. I'm not saying that Wikipedia is bad, but anyone can post on Wikipedia. So has the Wikipedia page been checked for, to validate it and verify its claims? Now, we're going back to interpersonal skills. Why is this? Since we have properly done our research on the internet, you can actually take drama and theater to a whole new level. How about journalism and role play? So now we're combining drama theater, which are collaborative elements with communication. We have done proper research about the individual we want to take an interview of, and we're putting everything together. We're practicing note-taking. We can write an article based on the questions that we're asking him. And of course, this all requires written preparation and the research that we've done online. This will foster responsibility. I remember I took my kids on a field trip and we went to a newspaper and we had them interview the chief editor of the newspaper. It was a wonderful experience, but they had prepared the questions in advance. They had done their research properly. Thank God. Now, what about well-being and self-confidence? Intrapersonal skills, or what we call emotional intelligence. Okay, so what is emotional intelligence? We're talking about self-awareness. What do we mean by self-awareness? It means that we acknowledge our strengths and our weaknesses, our limitations and our aspirations. What about self-regulation? Can we control our emotions when we're with other people, especially when we collaborate and communicate? Because all of these transversal competencies are connected. Self-regulation is important when we want to support someone, endorse the other individual. Motivation. Do I have what it takes, the energy to set goals, work hard and achieve my goals, my aspirations? Empathy. Am I supportive of others? Do I acknowledge when someone is going through a troubled time? Am I there for him? And of course, social skills, or PR skills as they are called, public relations skills, the capacity to be a leader, to inspire others, and to set an example for them to follow. All of this is called emotional intelligence, and it can lead, as we can see in the image on the right, to increased leadership ability, team performance, decision making, decreased occupational stress, reduced staff turnover if we're talking about employers, and of course, increased personal well-being. Now, if we're talking about emotional intelligence, we're talking about establishing proper relationships in class. Let's start with a teacher-student relationship. First of all, you have to get to know your students. Family background, a student with special educational needs. As teachers, we are obliged to know this information to assist our students in the best possible way. That is why the school owners must keep us in the loop and inform us of anything that we should be aware of. And it's not about gossiping. It's about supporting our students to reach the best and, take advantage of their potential. Relationship with classmates. How many kids actually carry over troubles and, arguments from class all the way to their language center? They do this quite often, and there's a lot of tension. So it's a good thing to see what's going on, speak with the parents, speak with the students, and try to ease the tension. And of course, it is wonderful to know what their personal interests are. It's not a bad thing to ask how football practice went or who their favorite movie star is. So do your research. Ask them about their hobbies, the people that they look up to, celebrities, music, everything. They will acknowledge and reciprocate in turn. They will understand that you are invested in your students, and they will in turn acknowledge this. So it's all about instilling respect and cooperation. Now, as for the student-student relationship, well, a student will not participate, and in most cases be terrified if he thinks he will be teased or even bullied in class. Teachers should be aware of this. Also, there's the factor of shyness or criticism. The whole thing is that the student-student relationship must be fostered. A student must feel safe, confident, and happy when attending his classes. We want to promote inclusiveness, teamwork, respect towards one another. Now, as for participation itself, because I just mentioned that if they don't feel comfortable, they will not participate. Praise the student's efforts, even if he makes mistakes. And you know what? Students should encourage each other. Come on, everybody. A huge round of applause. He did a good job. Encourage them to clap from time to time. And you know what? We're teachers, and sometimes we have a tendency to correct our students on the spot. We, as teachers, should disregard this bad habit. Correct your students after they have finished speaking. If they are corrected while speaking, they lose focus or panic or just want to give up. Now, look at this example of a student. The girl, she is wearing a wonderful pink dress. She is walking the first and looks happy. If I had corrected her on the third word, she would not have produced this wonderful sentence. A little mistake in the beginning. I'm not saying we should disregard it, but keep a mental note. and explain it to the student after he or she has finished. It will make a world of difference. Now, what about disrespectful students that will just, correct their classmates on the spot? Oh, you made a mistake. It was supposed to be like this. I'm sorry, but that's our fault as teachers. Set the rules in class. Make it perfectly clear to everyone at the beginning of the school year that only the teacher will be correcting students during the lesson. We're talking about diversity, inclusiveness, and offering students, all of the students, the potential and, the ability to reach, their fullest. Students with special educational needs requires us to tailor the lesson as regards time, the elements examined, and marking, of course. It's our obligation as teachers to make sure our students are offered equal opportunity to perform and shine. How are we going to do this? With transversal competencies. Use communication, collaboration, use a variety of stimulation, speaking, listening, reading. If something doesn't work, try something else. It's our job. We care about our kids and we're obliged to do so. Now, as for fostering global ties, we are promoting global citizenship. Yes, we are part of a huge society. And you know what? I keep telling this throughout my speeches, everywhere I attend. I mean, children are not born racist. Diversity, inclusiveness, gender equality, and respect are values they are obliged to adopt. Now, how can we achieve this? That's a good question. Education. Education is key. Ignorance is what leads to racism. So we have to expose them to cultures, traditions, viewpoints, and learning a language is the key to an inclusive society. So, as we can see, the benefits of adopting transversal competencies are many. It helps to improve decision making. It enhances problem solving, research skills, our creativity, and of course, it stimulates our curiosity in class. Once the critical mind, starts working, he will be thirsty for more knowledge, and that's what we want. We want curious, hungry little minds. And you know what? We're fostering a lifetime skill. I am an advocate of lifelong learning, and throughout my whole life, I've been trying to improve my mental capacity, who I am, and mostly the values that I support as a person. This is something that we should assist our children in. So, as teachers, it's our obligation and duty to prepare them, the next generation of the future, our children. And of course, this is our legacy. Now, I would like to thank you all for attending this presentation. I hope that these activities, helped you um, include some new ideas into your teaching syllabus. Thank you all. In case you would like to download this presentation, the PowerPoint file is available at my personal blog. You can see it at the bottom of the screen, katherinereilly.blog. You just enter that as the URL in your Google browser or any browser that you use, and you'll find a post concerning this presentation. Thank you once again. For any questions, you can speak with our representatives. Here's the phone number, and of course, any questions that you have, I will be here after the event and so happy to answer them. Take care and have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for everything.